So I recently hit my 1 year anniversary for this channel. And as I was reflecting on it, I realized, well, it's been super fun. And I really appreciate all of you that have been subscribing to my channel, commenting, watching, giving me feedback, etc., and supporting the channel generally. I haven't given you a lot of information about me and why you should even care what I have to say. And so I thought it might be helpful get this 1 year anniversary to tell you my story and help you learn a little bit more about who I am and why I'm doing this channel to begin with. So it all kind of starts back when I was a kid. So when I was a kid, both of my parents worked. My mom was an attorney, my dad was a computer engineer. And as such, they would drop me off at school in the morning, and then after school, I would go and walk up to my friend's house, who lived nearby, and his mom and parents would basically raise me and my siblings during the afternoons. And so we would play with them, they would make us dinner, and then my parents would come, they'd eat dinner with us, and then we'd head home. It was kind of, a little bit different of a childhood growing up during those formative years. But one of the things that I loved doing at that time was playing with Legos with my best friend. We used to play, he had this like big sled under his bed, and it was just full of Lego. And we would sit all afternoon and we'd build all kinds of different things, and we'd have a ton of fun doing that. And that really catalyzed this desire within me to build things. And I just loved that idea of building and creating. And then on top of that, like I said, my dad was a computer engineer, and I just, really loved and respected my dad and looked up to him a ton. And so I wanted to be an engineer one day. And that's what I thought I would do with my career. I was like, hey, Lego is like engineering, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be just like my dad. Well, fast forward, while I was in high school, kind of still on that track, my dad decided to quit his job at Lockheed Martin. Now, Lockheed Martin is one of the largest defense contractors in the world. It was a great job for him and something that a lot of people aspire to work at a company like that. But he got really tired of being treated like an engineer, and he wanted to be more entrepreneurial. And so at that time, we started reading the books like Cash Flow Quadrant and Rich Dad Poor Dad by Richard Kiyosaki, and started doing a lot of real estate investing. And so I spent my summers in high school, instead of going to summer camp, I spent my summers gutting out apartments and remodeling them and putting them back on the market, which was great. I learned, it was a hard, sweaty, hot, kind of sometimes boring job, but I learned how to fix outlets, put in plumbing, rip out walls, put in new flooring, put up drywall, paint, all of those things have been, really useful skills to have even to this day. During that time, though, I started to develop this love for not just real estate, but just investing in general and entrepreneurship. And so when I graduated from high school, I ended up going to college, and my thought was I'm just going to go to college because I want to be an entrepreneur, and so I'll learn some stuff there, but really I'm here to start a company. The opportunity to spend a couple years in Spain, and while I was in Spain, I saw these things, these vending machines for movie rentals. And the irony is that most of them were owned by Redbox, of all things. But it was, it was a vending machine. You would go up, you'd swipe your credit card, put in your information, and it would give you a DVD, and then you could go watch that movie and bring it back, just like Redbox, right? Except for this was years before Redbox existed in the US. So I thought, this is great. I'm going to bring this concept to the US. And I was in talks with a guy who owned about 150 Little Caesars, and the idea was pizza and a movie for $6. That's a great idea, right? At that same time, right as we were in the middle of negotiating the first box and putting it in place and all of that stuff, Redbox announced over $100 million in funding and a deep partnership with McDonald's, and believe it or not, Utah as their pilot market. So I decided to shelve it because I wasn't going to be able to compete as a super young, naive college student against a company that raised, over $100 million and had all these partnerships. So I kind of put it on the back burner, and at that time, a good friend of mine was like, hey, I heard about this thing called University Venture Fund. I think you would find it really interesting, and I think you'd be a good fit for it. So I got involved, I applied, and ultimately got into the fund. And at that time, University Venture Fund was an $18 million student-run venture capital fund that co-invested alongside other top-tier venture capital funds in primarily technology companies, but also some life science companies as well. And, so I joined that company as an intern, as a part-time intern. And fast forward, I decided to go on an internship with Citi, where I worked in their real estate group in Latin America, based out of Miami. So, which was, it was a great experience to work for a larger company. But I was gone for 6 months. And when I came back, the guys that had started the firm had left. They went to go do other things. And the fund as an organization was kind of teetering a little bit. Well, they brought in this gentleman who's now my business partner, Tom. And Tom is awesome. And, his background is a lot of investment banking, Harvard MBA, etc. Well, he came in to be like the interim director. And at that point, a lot of the students that had been involved in the fund left because there wasn't a lot going on. They didn't know what was going on. They had other interests and other opportunities that they pursued. And so, we lost a lot of students, but rather than leave, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go all in on University Venture Fund, and I'm going to try to make it successful with Tom. So we worked closely to revamp the entire soup to nuts organization, like how we did due diligence, how we sourced deals, how we tracked companies, how we recruited students, how we trained students, kind of all of those elements. And so I did that for a couple years as a student. And then when I graduated, I actually went to Africa for the summer, helping launch micro franchise businesses in northern Ghana, which was a very interesting experience and I loved. And when I came back, Tom was able to secure a full-time opportunity for me. So I joined the fund full-time when I graduated in 2009. And then together we ran that fund for another 6 years. And we made some amazing investments, like one of my all-time best performing investments called Instructure. And you should check out the video where I talk about that story in my channel. We also made investments in companies like Control4, which did home automation and sparked my interest and love for all things like consumer products, electronics, and Internet of Things. We made investments in companies like Workfront that ultimately got acquired by Adobe for several $billion dollars, and really kind of formalized a lot of my thinking around how to do venture investing. I also, during that time, recruited and trained and mentored and helped numerous students start their career in high finance, whether it was venture capital, investment banking, hedge funds, real estate funds. We even had some students go off and start their own companies and be successful. And so I had the opportunity to get a front row seat in helping all of these amazing, awesome individuals, men and women, go on and start their careers and do amazing things. And I loved every moment about it, because what I've discovered about myself is that I love helping people, I love building things, and I love learning. And so University Venture Fund was just like a perfect fit for me, because I was helping entrepreneurs and I was helping students. I was constantly learning because, there's so many different types of businesses out there that you can learn from, people, entrepreneurs you can learn from, and new trends and business models and technologies. And so the learning curve never plateaus. I feel like I'm drinking from the fire hose even to this day after having been a venture investor for the last 15 years. And then lastly, I love building things. And so as we were building University Venture Fund, we kind of got to this point where we couldn't build it anymore because we ran into some challenges with the board. And the board really wanted to go do impact investing, which we thought was great, but not what we wanted to do. So in 2014, 2015, my partner and I spun out of University Venture Fund and launched University Growth Fund, with the goal to basically continue everything we were doing, but do it better, make it bigger, make it more impactful, do bigger deals, raise a larger fund, etc. And so we launched our first fund, raising $32 million, which was, I'll tell you, really scary. As a first time fund manager, going out and fundraising, it was really challenging, but we were really fortunate to have some amazing people to support us. We ended up raising that first $32 million fund, and we're very fortunate to be able to invest in some amazing companies during the 2015 through 2020 time period. We were able to invest in companies like Spotify and Snapchat, now known as Snap. We invested in Airbnb. We invested in Pinterest. We invested in Postmates. Our very first investment was in Lyft. And you should check out that video that I talk about my story with Lyft. We invested in other companies that you probably haven't heard of that have done incredibly well, like Toast, which does point of sale systems for restaurants, and Carta that does cap table management. Anyways, we had a really fun time. Not only that, we brought in tons of students. We opened an office in San Diego, and then later on an office in Atlanta, and then eventually raised our second fund, which ended up being a $56 million fund, and have deployed in over 30 deals out of that fund now in some amazing companies that I'm super proud of. And we've impacted hundreds of students. And as I was going through all of that, I was watching what was happening in social media, particularly around what was available around venture capital. And one of the things that got me really excited is that there is this movement to provide more opportunities for the average person who's not super rich to get access to alternative investments. And I love it because so many of these alternative assets for years have been restricted to the rich, right? If you want to invest in a venture startup, you pretty much have to be rich to invest in our fund, and then we'll invest in the startup. And so it's like this very closed market and industry that excludes the poor, essentially, or the middle class from getting access to these amazing investment opportunities. But that's changing with the Jobs Act and other legislation that has opened the doors for equity crowdfunding, real estate investing, all kinds of things that have opened up the door for more non-accredited investors to participate. The problem, though, is that accredited investor requirements are there for a reason. They're there because years ago, people that were unscrupulous would basically defraud investors out of a lot of money because those investors didn't know what they were doing. And so a lot of people, literally and figuratively, lost their shirt investing in bad investment schemes. And so I looked at my experience and I said, you know what? For the last 15 years, I have trained hundreds of students through my fund and through our venture capital case competitions and other mediums to make good venture investments. And as I looked around at all the VCs that are out there, that with all of their podcasts and everything else, it seemed like all the other VCs were really focused on people that were already in the industry, that already kind of knew what was going on. And I wanted to bring the education to the broader masses to help those that were interested in venture capital but didn't know where to start, to have a pathway to get there so that they could make some great investments, that they could avoid some of the pitfalls that I've gone through and learn from my mistakes, as well as hopefully learn from some of my accomplishments so that they can replicate those and have a great investment experience as they go out and invest in all things alternative assets. Anyways, I'm really excited for this channel. I recently hit over 1,000 subscribers, which I'm really proud about, even though it still feels really small. It's been fun, and I appreciate all of your support. If you want to know where I would start in my channel, check out my video, How to Start a Venture Capital Fund from Nothing, where I'll talk about some of the basics of what a venture capital fund is and how I would approach it if I had to start all over from scratch again.